L'chaim, everybody. Tonight is big. Tonight we're back after all the holidays. We're back to real life, essentially. It's very easy to get caught up in the high of the holidays. No pun intended there. But then we have the lows, or the regulars, of life. And the holidays are meant to charge us with the power that we can have for the rest of the year. The inspiration that we took on Rosh Hashanah, and the commitments that we made on Yom Kippur, and the happiness that we experienced on Sukkot, and the elation and the joy of Simchat Torah this year, coupled also with remembrance of the first year of the massacre, which didn't dampen the joy, at least in our Chabad, thank God. We memorialized, but then we danced. We did both, because Jews can do both. That's what Jews have been doing for thousands of years. We are a living paradox. We do the dance, the impossible dance, dancing on the edge of the sword. We can carry sadness and joy in the same moment. And all that we take with us into the rest of the year. There's a couple of metaphors that Hasidim used to give for this. They used to say, during Tishrei, during the month of the high holidays and the holidays, you're packing your suitcase. The rest of the year is the trip. But during the trip, you unpack the luggage slowly, right? When you pack for a trip. So one day you take out this shirt, the next day you take out these pants. So all the holidays we're packing the bags, and now it's time to unpack the bags.
Passover, we do our laundry, so we get to the end.
Passover, we do the laundry. It's good. Exactly. They used to also say that it's like a tea essence. Today they don't do this so much anymore, but sometimes if you had a big crowd and you wanted to serve them all tea, so you just put a bunch of tea bags in the water, and then the tea becomes super, super, super potent. And then, for every cup, you pour a little bit in, and then you mix it with water, and it's like a tea. So that's the same thing as Tishrei. You pack it in, pack it in. People ask, why so many holidays, one after another? I couldn't take a break. Especially this year, we had 3 times, 3-day holidays. So it's Thursday, Friday, Shabbos, Thursday, Friday, Shabbos, Thursday, Friday, Shabbos. What's the big deal? Because you gotta pack it in. And then when you pack it in, then you could live with it the rest of the year. You can't forget though. You have to take the rest of the year with you. It's like, they had the locomotive when the train was just invented. So they had all the power was in the front car, and then it pulled all the other cars with it. But if you forget to hook on the first train car to the locomotive, then it doesn't go anywhere. So that's the same thing also for us. The locomotive is Tishrei. It's smoking. It's powerful. It's amazing. It's full of energy and life. But now we have to hook on the train car. All of these metaphors just to say that we're really kind of starting what could be labeled as the boring part of the year. It's not so entertaining now. The next holiday we have is Hanukkah in 2 months, and then we have Purim and Pesach. So really the next 5 months are like just the daily grind. They're the daily grind. And we have to make sure that we can bring in the energy into the daily grind. And how amazing, I cannot make this stuff up. I don't dictate when the classes happen and when they don't. But how amazing that this is exactly the theme of the chapter that we're studying. This idea of packing in energy to one time frame and having that last or be an influence over the coming time frames is exactly the life of the Benoni. We have reached the point in the Tanya where we're discussing the man we always intended to discuss. It took a while to get there, but the Alter Rebbe developed the groundwork and basically brought us to a point where now we know what the extremes are. We know that the giver, the person who gives in is the Rasha, the person who is totally inspired and has a different soul is the tzaddik, but the average man, and the possibility of the average man, is to be the guy who is always in control of thought, speech, and action. And he does that, one of the ways, one of the big tactics of the Benoni, by having an amazing davening experience. That's like a mini high holiday season every day. When he goes in for the hour to shul in the morning, he puts everything he's got into the experience. And by heating up the oven, like we said the metaphor 3 weeks ago, by heating up the oven in the morning super hot, the heat will last throughout the day. The Benoni's influence will last throughout the day because of what he's done during the davening. And today, the page, we try to do about a page a week on average. The page in the original Tanya, I know in the practical Tanya it covers a bunch of pages. But the page of Tanya that we're doing today is basically the result. How does it actually play out for the Benoni on the day-to-day? And I came across something fascinating that I want to spend a little time on, even though it's not in the Tanya. It's a psychological concept, but I believe it relates very much to the thrust of the point that the Alter Rebbe makes. And I didn't hear of it till recently as a concept. I had heard of the idea a lot because it's a fundamental Hasidic concept. I never heard the scientific or the psychological term for it. Maybe you have. This is something that's called urge surfing. Has anybody heard of urge surfing? Okay, this is fascinating. You're going to like this. This is good. You can check it up online later. A very interesting doctrine or technique. It basically says a universal truth. We all experience urges. Some of us, it comes less often. Some of us, it comes more often. But many of us can say that at least daily, we're challenged with an urge. And it doesn't have to be a bad urge. For some of us, it is a bad urge. Too much chocolate, too much caffeine. But some of us have an urge to connect with people. We want to be social. And some of them can be detrimental. People want to gamble. People want to, be alcoholics. People want to be workaholics. People want to be in different types of relationships that they shouldn't be involved in. These are urges. And the scientific study of urges is very wide-ranging. There's different ways to define it. There are different types of urges. Many of them develop as our brains relate a certain stimulus with a result. If early on we're taught that every time you do this, it feels good, so now the brain starts making these links and wants you to have more of it. But the ones that could be the most sinister are the urges that come as an attempt to escape from how we feel. These are the ones that hit us when we're angry, when we're stressed, when we're tired, when we're bored, when we're lonely. I actually heard that as an acronym, BLAST. The worst urges come by BLAST. Bored, lonely, angry, stressed, or tired. Yeah. Tired. And the mind, what it does is basically it wants to get you away from that. We don't like to feel angry. We don't like to feel stressed. And so we'll escape to giving in to whatever urge it is.
Is that the surfing part?
No, hold on. This is so we're getting there. Generally speaking, I want to say till recent times, the understanding of how a human being, and especially a Jew, should approach urges is to suppress them. Yep. That's how our Zaydis were taught. You ask your Zaydi from 100 years ago, what should I do? I want to steal. You want to steal? Don't steal. What should I do? I want to go to this place. Just don't. There wasn't a lot of room for negotiation. It was just the urge comes up, suppress it. Now, as we discover more and become more self-aware, and the world of psychology and this science becomes very, very much developed, obviously what's come out is things that are now self-evident to every single one of us, is that the more you suppress an urge, you actually end up, the more you increase it, essentially. Especially if you fight it. One of the worst things you can do is to try to fight the urge actively. Trying to tell yourself why you shouldn't and talk yourself out of it. ideally, some desires could be satisfied. It's a good desire. You want to eat breakfast, satisfy it. Go eat it. Go eat a breakfast. Others, as long as your brain is in a good space, you can rationally throw it out. We can all acknowledge the stupidity of certain of our desires, so long as we're not in a tension zone. We can kind of throw it out. But the ones that you don't discard nor satisfy, that's the ones you suppress, and those are the ones that come back to haunt you. Because you think you suppressed it for now, but you didn't really suppress it. So here comes this concept called urge surfing. It was developed as this term in 1985. They basically said a great technique for managing urges is to look at them like a physical wave to a surfer. How does a surfer see waves? They rise. Well, but there's a technique there. They rise.
First you paddle.
Huh? Okay, I don't know the surfing technique exactly, but the wave itself. The wave itself rises, stabilizes, peaks, and falls.
Yeah.
So they said, observe your urge as a physical manifestation of a wave. Watch it as though you're outside of it, without judgment, with full acceptance of the urge. It's okay, process it. It's another thing, because many of us get turned off to ourselves by our own urges. I'm tempted to that. I'm craving this low thing. Here I am developing myself to be X, Y, and Z, and this is what's coming to me with complete acceptance.
So you first acknowledge.
Yes, and then watch it, because it actually will do that. Urges will rise, stabilize, peak, and fall. That's what they will do. And with the right mindfulness, watching it basically surf the urge. Let it come through you and let it pass through you. It sounds very simple. It's not as simple to do in the moment. That's why it's a discipline, and they talk about, of course, you got to make sure you're doing it in a guided way, in a consistent way, in a disciplined way. I get it, all the things. But the concept is wonderful. The concept of divorcing yourself from your urge and allowing the urge to pass through as a wave would ride you over. Imagine you're surfing, okay? One of the worst things you could do if you're trying to get the wave is to fight it. Imagine you're going to fight the wave. It's going to overtake you. That's what an urge will do. If you try to fight it, hey, don't come, they get too close, or I'll work it out, no, it's gonna sweep you away with it. Accept it, and you don't have to give in. Just let it come and go.
Doesn't take you with it?
No, it won't. That's the funny thing about it. It won't, and you could see why it won't, because you're just observing it. Anyway, there's a lot more to be said on the topic, but I found it fascinating as I'm reading this page of Tanya, and I happened to come across it on the internet. I said, wow, one of the core teachings that the Alter Rebbe makes in this chapter to the Benoni, to the person who's trying to achieve this level of self-mastery, he says, do not delude yourself into thinking that urges will not come. Urges will come. Temptation is all around you. They will come even unconsciously. You can protect yourself or think that you're protecting yourself, insulate yourself, but the exposure will come. The simplest thing, like walking down the street. Today it's insane. Today we have it in our pockets. You're trying to watch a video and then an ad pops up and then your mind goes places. In the olden days they used to talk about walking down the street and you see a billboard. Oh, that's the trigger. It's there. The question is, or the call of the hour is, do not give in. And I don't want to say that Alter Rebbe literally describes this concept. I think I should let the Alter Rebbe talk for himself. He describes it in quite a radical way. if I might say so myself. But he does say that it is within the capacity of every human being to rule his or her urges. He never says suppress it. He never says don't acknowledge it. He never says fight it. You have the power with your mind, that's what he says, to rule it. And I read into that a little bit of this. The mind is powerful enough to calm the urge. Not necessarily with direct dialogue, but with the power of the mind. We have this power to hold ourselves, stay in control, and not let the heart sweep us away.
So you act on it, but you don't act on it.
In a way, the way it was told to me, that's why I'm saying that I'm very familiar with this concept, because in Yeshiva they would talk about this to us a lot. Understand, and maybe this should be off the record, but it's a fact. Young teenage boys in an Orthodox setting are dealing with urges to which there is no outlet. Right? Judaism is against acting out of any sort, within or without the context of marriage. So you have these boys for years on end that are being subjected to this type of challenge. For every boy it's at different degrees, I understand it. But there has to be talk and education and tips and technique on this. And there was, thank God, in our yeshiva. And one of the ways they used to frame it was exactly this concept. They used to say, stop trying to fight it, let it pass over you. If you try to tell yourself, I'm not going to have any improper thoughts, it's not going to work. And you're going to begin to obsess, and you're going to begin to feel guilty, and then the guilt will lead to shame, and the shame will lead to acting out. So the circle is just vicious. But I like that expression, what you just said. It's like acting out without acting out. Kind of, yeah. It's like, let it come through you. And I think next week we're going to go a little bit more into that. It doesn't mean to entertain the urge. There's a very fine line there, right? Because if the urge is, let's say, to replay images or scenes, then that itself is a form of giving in. So I don't want to say that, that you should go, like, that's not a license to go all the way there. But it is a license to give yourself the gift of experiencing your own humanity. And then saying, okay, that's wonderful. I don't need to act on that. Boom. Because acting is a lower part of myself that I can control.
And they go away.
They do. Like the waves.
How is that different?
They
from
fall.
suppressing it?
Because suppressing says, I don't have the urge. Suppressing lives in denial almost of your condition. The urge surfing,
Observe it,
and you watch it do its thing,
but you don't act on it.
but you don't act on it. And you won't have to, because you'll feel empowered. Again, just a gist of the concept. We could go on to this. This is a whole study and a whole field.
This is a pretty common thing. I mean, if you think about Alcoholics Anonymous, and the concept there is you're an alcoholic for life. You acknowledge it. And
Yes.
You say, for the next hour, I'm going to conquer the bottle. For the next hour, I'm going
That's
to
right.
But 2 hours from now, I'm going to feel the urge again. I know
Exactly.
I'm an alcoholic for life. I take one step at a time,
Yeah.
and that's how I keep it at bay.
And there's a big humility about that.
Totally. But there's an acknowledgement that you're never going to cure it. There's no shame about it. It's cool. I'm always going to want to do it.
And you're going to manage it, and you're going to live a great life.
Well, it would seem to me that it requires some amount of discipline to deal with it. It takes some training.
Of course it does. I'm not saying we can walk out here and just be professionals at it. I'm just talking about the idea. But even the AA people, or anybody that's in recovery for whatever type of a thing, of course you have to. The moment you're arrogant enough to think that you've conquered it is the moment you're going to fall.
What about, like, if you are obsessive compulsive, like you have that kind of disorder?
Yeah.
And the urges don't go away. Like you are
You're constantly
your
thinking
mind
about it.
is really screwing with you, and you're
Yeah, these are clinical things.
Right.
These require, as another category. The Tanya is a religious book. I've often said that in the last cycle when we were doing book 1. The Tanya is not a psychological doctrine. It's answers and discussions that the Alter Rebbe had with religious seekers. And the understanding is that more or less they were healthy psychologically. So these were issues that they were dealing with over and above the regular human concepts. But they do filter down and can help and can assist any type of developmental search. All that being said, I do want to take a look at the Alter Rebbe's words itself, because I think, certainly for his time, and today even, people might find this thought radical. So take a look at page 143. If you have the book, page 143. I'm actually curious to hear your thoughts, or anybody watching online to leave it in the comments. I get a lot of comments about Christian stuff, but no comments about the actual content of the class. So, if anybody that watches, and we,
Random users?
from random people, yeah.
Okay.
But I'm always interested. If people want to give comments on the content, it's always accepted. But in the live, I'm actually interested if somebody has a thought on this. So this is 143, second paragraph. Okay, we're going to start with the commentary a little bit, and then go to the Tanya. So he says, you know what? Let's go back a paragraph to the top of 143. The Benoni cannot stop the urge for self-gratification from entering his mind. What he can do is to refrain from intentionally dwelling on such thoughts, having substantive thought, by diverting his mind to something else, as we will discuss further on in chapter 28. So the Alter Rebbe says it's going to be there. You can control it. Still, the self-mastery of the Benoni is difficult to fully understand. If he harbors the desire for self-gratification in his soul, surely at some point his desires will eventually overcome him. How can we be assured that on every occasion he will not allow his mind to dwell on these urges or to act on them in any way? To answer this question, the Tanya cites a fundamental teaching of the Zohar about human nature. Listen to this, because this is the words of the Zohar. This is Kabbalah directly from Hashem. And let's read it. This is the words of the Tanya. Since inherently and in its natural capacity, the brain rules over the heart, as stated in the Zohar portion of Pinchas 3, 224a. For that is how a man is formed at birth. Talk about nature, nurture. This is nature. The Alter Rebbe is saying, and the Zohar is really saying, a fact of human nature. This means that any person can, with the willpower of his brain, restrain himself and take control of his heart's urges so as to prevent his heart's desires from being enacted, spoken, or contemplated, to divert his attention away from his heart's urges entirely to something completely different. And I want to read one more paragraph of the commentary, and then we'll talk about this. By stressing that the brain rules over the heart as a natural function, the Tanya takes our discussion temporarily away from the war between good and evil. Your ability to divert a certain negative thought or to refrain from a particular destructive action does not depend on your level of self-mastery or on tapping into the powers of good in the universe. 144. It is simply a function of the human condition. Your brain is able to exert sufficient willpower to control your actions and substantive thoughts. I think 200 years ago when time it was written, this was an absolutely radical idea.
It's like flipping the script.
It's like literally saying the way you're programmed, your wiring includes a feature that allows you to turn on the willpower in your brain to control every substantive thought, speech, and action. Now, that's the way you were born. I'm not saying people can mess with your mind and do things to you in your childhood that will completely deregulate the systems. But as a theme, as a healthy human being, the brain is powerful enough to completely rule the heart. Notice, he never says to rule the urges. He never says that. The urges will be there. They're going to come again and again and again, and they're going to knock on your window, and they're going to challenge you, and they're going to bang on your consciousness. But if you can tap in to that part of your human nature, nothing to do with good or godliness, just humanity, your brain can win. Now I got to hear what the feedback is from the crowd. Tell me what you think on this. How does it hit you when I say that your brain naturally has the power to control and discipline every one of your actions?
Is it to use the energy, to channel the energy, maybe the sublimation? Is it
Before the
sublimation?
tactic, do you believe, or does this resonate with you, that your brain, if it exercises its willpower to the right degree, can control every thought, speech, and action? Absolutely.
I think it sort of delves into the realm of the theoretical, because I think there's so many damaged human beings.
Yeah, I know what you mean. No, I know what you mean.
You could be, yeah, I mean, whatever, could be a sweet tooth or whatever, and you could either sort of remove them from the category of being a Benoni, and that way the rule applies neatly.
Right.
Because they're not a Benoni anymore. But I think that once you clean out all the people that aren't as pure, it applies to very few people.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
That's a very good point.
At the end of the day.
It's a very good point. In other words, kind of like what many psychologists will say today. It's like a child is inherently normal. But so many children are getting messed up by their parents or by their families or by the communities in which they grow up, that now you don't even have a demographic with which to begin to design a groundwork, because you're like, well, everybody got messed up at some point in the first 10 years of their life, so now we're all doing repair work.
It depends on what's put in your head.
Yes.
Palestinian kid who was brought up to hate.
Indoctrinated.
Yeah,
Right.
indoctrinated from day one.
So where do we have the brain
Use
ruling?
a gun, and that's
Sure.
how will they control that urge when it's not?
This is
In their eyes, it's what their God wants them
Right.
to do.
So if we're made in Hashem's image, I think about like when, was it Abraham who was negotiating with Hashem? Hashem wanted to wipe out
Yeah.
the entire city, right? So,
Yes, Sodom,
so
yeah.
Hashem has urges, right? And Abraham was able to have like a more kind of mental dialogue with Hashem, talk Hashem off the ledge, and negotiate with him. So, so I feel like when he created us in his image, he wanted us to have a mind that can reason. Even if our soul resides more in our heart, he wanted us to have a powerful mind.
Yes. Well, the soul resides in the mind. The godly soul resides in the mind. So
Right, that's right, I forgot that.
you have that, but the animal soul resides in the heart. But it's true.
It's a very reassuring concept, actually, because when you're dealing with the world will try and make you think it's the opposite.
Yes. Today's reality, that's why it's very refreshing that so many of you do resonate with it, because I would say that today's world does not support this concept. Today's world wants to advertise the weakness of the human being and preach the weakness of the human being.
And encourage acting out.
And at its worst, encourage acting out, but even at its best, encourage this constant need of crutches from the outside. And the Zohar reassures us, and the Alter Rebbe is saying this, and like you said, it's a very good word, it's a very reassuring concept, because it informs us of the truth of the human being, which might address your point, Mike, as well, which is, even if it's not observable in the data, in the sense that so many of us have been subjected to harmful influences or whatever that has altered the mind-altering experiences, but this is the truth of reality. The truth of reality is that every one of us was born with a mind powerful enough that if you access the willpower in the right way, you can control.
Right? That's key.
Doesn't this
We're born
require-
with that.
Yeah,
And that's key.
born.
You know, I think
And
that-
come back to it. Huh?
Great song.
It seems like the Alter Rebbe is kind of like reassuring this in a way where it's like it's not so far as we think.
Yes.
You know
I mean, the whole Tanya is based on that verse. Ki karov elecha, it's close to you. Close meaning relevant, close meaning also in a way accessible.
Yeah, you get
Okay, there's a lot of clutter, of course. Yeah,
I agree.
if we clear out the mess. But this concept,
The concept
yes.
is that it can't happen. It can't
yes. And again, the tactics vary. But the tactic which the Alter Rebbe offers, and I do want to spend some time on it, even though the main discussion is going to take place next week on the last page of this chapter. But I want to just go back to that line at the end on 143. If you turn back the page, the last bold line, where it says, to divert his attention away from his heart's urges entirely to something completely different. The Hebrew is very rich. If you can read the Hebrew there, it's ulahasiach dato. Lahasiach dato, divert is a great word in English for that. It's like, it denotes moving the mind. The Rebbe was a huge advocate of this concept. And I think it's been slightly misinterpreted. And maybe we should crystallize it. Talking before about young boys and their challenges. So, not all young boys are pure. Some of them ended up acting out. Many of them, maybe, ended up acting out in yeshiva. And it's funny that the Rebbe publicly almost never addressed it. His way was always light. If we give lots of light, the darkness doesn't have a room to develop. And the Alter Rebbe actually mentions it here. But privately, in private audiences that he would have one-on-one with people, in letters, as is being revealed now more and more and more as people come forth and offer their archives and their notes and their diaries. It's amazing how much the Rebbe dealt with these issues. And when boys would write to him, these are young boys, teenagers, 15, 16, 19, and they would say they're plagued by guilt over things that they had done. The Rebbe would always say, he never referenced it by name, which is why I'm not doing it either. He was always euphemizing it. He said, ha'inyan hayadua, the well-known failure that most young boys have. That's what he would say. With regards to the well-known subject, hesech hadas is the solution. Diversion of the mind. And he would expound on it and he would say, maybe it ties into the urge surfing, but not exactly. He would say, you have to keep your mind occupied with other positive things. You shouldn't platform this type of thought. And by not platforming, he doesn't mean tackling it. Because when you tackle it, you become it. It's like dwelling on depressing thoughts. Even while trying to fight it, they're going to take you over. Diversion of the mind means just go to something else. You have to have something where you can always go back to, a comfort zone almost of sorts, but a pure comfort zone. Maybe it's a baseball game.
Safe space.
Okay? It doesn't have to be holy necessarily, but maybe it is something holy. And it's fantastic if it's holy. And the idea being that by platforming other things, this guy is only going to find himself backstage. He won't have an opportunity to come up. And by the way, we all have been there, so we know what that's like. You get into an exhilarating experience, nothing is a problem. Why? Because you're swept up in the experience. You go to a great concert, you're on a fantastic hike, you're on the beach watching the water. How come over there these things don't overtake us? How come over there we're in the zone and we're on fire? Because we're in the zone. And when you're in the zone, everything else is where? Out of the zone. Diversion of the mind doesn't mean active, moving this thought away. I'm not going to be thinking about you anymore. Guess what happens when you say that? You're just thinking about it more. You have to just have your go-to. And that becomes the light, which the Alter Rebbe actually describes. And we're going to close with this concept. He uses a verse from Kohelet, from Ecclesiastes, King Solomon's wisdom, which actually some Jewish communities have a custom to read on Sukkot. Sukkot that passed, many Jews read Kohelet. And Shlomo HaMelech, there's a verse there where he says, Vira'iti. It's like I observed. My life experience allowed me to observe Yisrain, or Shayesh Yisrain lachachma min hasichlus, kisrain ha'or min ha'choshech. Wisdom has an advantage over foolishness, like light has an advantage over darkness. And on the face of it, it's like, okay, did we need the comparison to know that wisdom is better than foolishness? I mean, who doesn't think there's an advantage to wisdom over foolishness? Ra'iti ani, I observed, in my great wisdom, the wisest of all men, I observed that wisdom is better than foolishness. Wow, thank you, Rabbi. It's a little bit funny. And the commentaries struggle with it. They all want to know, what's the novelty here? So here the Alter Rebbe gives one answer. He says the novelty is in the metaphor. You have to look at the metaphor of light and darkness. What is the advantage that light has over darkness? Or what's the winning power that light has over darkness? So he says twofold. There's a twofold advantage of how light plays versus how darkness plays. A little bit of light can push away lots of darkness. You don't need a lot of quantity. You just need the right quality. B, light doesn't deal with dark. It simply presents itself and the darkness disappears. Like that story that I love to tell about the king who had 3 sons and wanted to figure out which is the most deserving. Remember this one? So he said, who? Huh? No, the prostitute that was another thing. He has 3 sons. So he said, I need to see who is the most capable. So I'm going to give each of you a room, and whoever can fill the room within the time frame of 3 days will be the heir to my throne. So the first son is like, all right, I'm going to fill the room with feathers. Oh, the king gave them any amount of time to prepare, but only 3 days to fill the room. So one son is like, look, I'm going to be doing it with feathers, because feathers are light, not too much carrying. I'll just stuff them in, and then we'll fill the room in no time. So he ordered, truckloads of feathers to come line up by his room. And the second son is like, look, feathers, they're not going to work. We're going to do bricks. It's going to be work, but I can carry a couple thousand bricks in and out of a room. It's no big deal. So he orders his truckloads of bricks to the dimensions of the room. He's going to fill up the room. The third son is doing nothing, sitting and smoking cigars. And the time is getting closer, the deadline's getting closer, and the other brothers they're already they're filling up the feathers and the bricks, and he's just sitting there. Like there's no care in the world. Sure enough, timer begins. The feather guy is rushing his feathers into the room. 1 hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, 12 hours, and there's tons of feathers. But then, all the feathers that he accumulates, he kind of gives like one push, and they all contract into this not even 2 inches of the room. And he realizes that he's making a big mistake here. But he tries to keep on going, whatever. After a day, after 2 days, it's basically exhausted, but realizes that nothing is really going to happen with this. The bricks guy had the opposite story. He was all fired up the first couple hours. He was like carrying them in, but then he starts to sweat. And he starts to this, and it's getting too hard, and his back is hurting him, and he's lifting, and he's putting, and he's lifting, and he had to take a break, and then he had to lie down, and then this and that, and sure enough, also after 3 days, he's barely gotten to half the room. Meanwhile, the third son is doing nothing even over the 3 days. And the king was now getting a little bit concerned, because he's watching, what are you doing? Anyway, after 72 hours, king shows up, he's going to measure the achievements. So with the feathers, the king himself realized the trick. He comes into the room, there's too many feathers, but he just starts pushing and pushing, and then half the room disappears, and there's not even Not even, not even half the room is full. So he says, I'm sorry you lost the contest. Goes into the brick room. Yeah, whatever's there is there, but it's only 2/3 full. Then he takes the third son. He says, what have you been up to? Like, what do you know that we don't know? So he says, come with me, Dad. Takes him into the room, closes the door, takes out a match, lights it, and in an instant, the whole room is filled with light. He says, wow. He says, it did, right? The light just got a little stronger.
Beautiful.
He goes, you are the one. You are the one. That's the wisdom. So the light, little in quantity, passively battling. It doesn't even deal with the enemy. It just comes and the enemy finds another place. So says the Alter Rebbe, that is the secret of the wisdom and the foolishness. We're not talking about intellectual ideas, wisdom, foolishness. We're talking about the wisdom and the foolishness inside of you. Every single person has a spirit of wisdom and a spirit of foolishness. What's that? That's another term for the godly soul and the animal soul. Wisdom, by the way, we're going to see in chapter 18, is the core of the godly soul. And we'll see why. It's a whole thing with the word chokhmah, wisdom in Hebrew. If you deconstruct it, you can see the secret. But wisdom is the core of the godly soul. Foolishness is the core of the animal soul. The Talmud says the only reason a person does a sin is because he has a ruach shtut, he has a foolish idea comes into him. By default, he knows the truth, that everything is God and everything is connected with God, but the foolish thing convinces him that, oh, you'll be fine, even if you're not as religious or as observant or whatever it is. As we'll see in chapter 14, a wonderful, wonderful metaphor on that. The wisdom and the foolishness are battling. The holy wisdom and the unholy foolishness. And everybody wants to know, what's the secret? How do I get my wisdom to win my foolishness? This is wisdom and this is foolishness. It should be self-evident that wisdom should overpower foolishness, but yet we live out the day-to-day where we give into our foolishness and we don't listen to our wisdom. Says Kohelet, that's because you're not treating wisdom and foolishness like light and darkness. You're battling it in a different way. You're trying to fill the room with feathers or fill the room with bricks. You're not doing it in the right way. You want to know how to have an advantage of wisdom over foolishness? You want to know how the core of your pintel yid, the fire in your soul, could overpower the foolishness of your animal soul? You have to treat it or let it be light. Let it present itself, bring it into the arena, and watch the darkness dissipate. And it will, because naturally it can. The brain rules over the heart. Now granted, and Alter Rebbe doubles down on this because it seems like some of his Benonis were a little bit delusional. Is granted, you will not become a tzaddik. When you light the candle, how much is going to dissipate? Not the entire consciousness of your animal soul. You're not going to lose the urges. You're not going to lose the temptations or the cravings or the lusts or the desires. But it is going to dissipate the thought, speech, and action. That will go away in the face of the candle. You will always win. That's the possibility of the human being. The possibility of the human being is to strike that match. And poof. Thought, speech, and action become a non-problem. Because you access your inner core. You access that part of your brain with the willpower rightly exercised. Completely rules the heart. But this is the moyach shalat al alev. The secret, almost one of the most fundamental doctrines in the Tanya. From the Zohar, straight from the Zohar. That the mind rules the heart. L'chaim.